What happens when one of the most respected actors in the world walks onto a morning talk show only to be met with shocking disrespect and condescension? In just 34 seconds of one particular comment, a beloved television host would reveal her true colors and spark an on-air meltdown that nobody saw coming. This is the story of how Ian McKellen, the legendary actor known for his grace, his talent, and his decades of groundbreaking work, found himself in the middle of a television disaster. And it all started so innocently. The morning began like any other. The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and the audience sat ready to watch another cheerful interview. Ian McKellen walked onto the set with his usual warmth, smiling and waving to the crowd. He wore a smart blazer and looked every bit the distinguished gentleman that the world had come to admire. This was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance, a chance to talk about his latest project, share some stories, and connect with fans. Nothing controversial, nothing complicated. Lorraine Kelly sat in her chair, smiling, that familiar smile she always had for her guests. But something was different today. Something in her energy felt off. The crew noticed it. The producers noticed it. And very soon, Ian McKellen would notice it too. "Welcome, welcome," Lorraine said as Ian took his seat. "So lovely to have you here." "Thank you for having me," Ian replied with genuine kindness in his voice. "It's always a pleasure to be here." The interview started normally enough. They talked about his career, his experiences on stage, his memorable roles. Ian was charming and thoughtful, giving detailed answers that showed his passion for his craft. The audience was captivated. This was the Ian McKellen they loved, the one who could make Shakespeare feel accessible, who could bring fantasy characters to life, who had spent his entire life dedicated to the art of performance. But then something shifted. Lorraine leaned back in her chair, and her tone changed. It became sharper, more pointed. She looked at Ian with something that almost resembled impatience. "So," she said, her voice dripping with a strange kind of smugness, "you've been doing this for quite a long time now, haven't you?" Ian smiled, not quite catching the edge in her words yet. "Yes, I suppose I have. Nearly 6 decades now." "6 decades?" Lorraine repeated, and she laughed. But it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made everyone in the studio uncomfortable. "That's quite a lot, isn't it? I mean, don't you think it's maybe time to, let some of the younger actors have their moment?" The audience went quiet. The crew members exchanged glances. Had she really just said that? Ian's smile faltered for just a moment. He processed the comment, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Well, I think there's room for everyone in this industry. Young actors and experienced actors both bring something valuable." Sure," Lorraine said dismissively, waving her hand as if swatting away his words. "But I'm just saying, you've had your time in the spotlight, haven't you? Maybe it's a bit selfish to keep taking up all these big roles when there are so many fresh faces waiting for their chance." The atmosphere in the studio became tense. This wasn't playful banter. This was something else entirely. Ian sat up a bit straighter, his expression becoming more serious. "I don't believe I'm taking anything from anyone," he said carefully. "I work on projects that interest me, and I'm grateful that people still want to work with me. But I've never blocked anyone's path." Lorraine laughed again. That same uncomfortable laugh. "Oh, come on now. You can't possibly think that having the same old faces in every major production is good for the industry. People want something new, something exciting, not the same tired performances from people who've been around forever." Tired performances? The words hung in the air like a slap. Ian's eyes widened slightly. The insult was clear now. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a poorly worded question. This was deliberate. "I'm sorry," Ian said, his voice still controlled but with a noticeable edge. "But I think you're being quite unfair. I've never phoned in a performance in my life. Every role I take, I give everything I have." "I'm sure you think that," Lorraine said with a condescending smile. "But let's be honest. At a certain age, the passion just isn't there anymore, is it? You're just going through the motions, collecting your paycheck, and blocking opportunities for people who actually have something new to say. The audience gasped. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Ian took a deep breath. He was a professional. He had dealt with difficult interviews before, but this was something different. This was a host who seemed determined to belittle him on national television. "Lorraine," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I have to say, I'm quite surprised by this line of questioning. I came here to talk about my work, not to be told that I should retire." "Well, maybe someone needs to tell you," Lorraine shot back, her voice rising, because clearly nobody else has the guts to say it. "You're past your prime. You're taking roles away from younger actors who deserve them more. And honestly, watching you try to keep up with the demands of modern productions is just sad." Sad. She had called him sad. The crew was frozen. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out what to do. This was spiraling out of control, and it was happening live. Ian's jaw tightened. His hands, which had been resting calmly on the armrests, now gripped them slightly. He was a man known for his composure, his eloquence, his ability to handle any situation with grace. But everyone has a breaking point. "I have spent my entire life," Ian said, his voice low and intense, dedicated to this craft. "I have worked with the greatest directors, the most talented actors, and I have given everything I have to every single role. I have broken barriers, I have fought for representation, and I have never, not once, taken my position for granted. For you to sit there and tell me that I'm taking opportunities away from others, that I'm just going through the motions, that watching me work is sad, that is not only disrespectful to me, but it's disrespectful to everyone who has supported my career and believed in my work." Lorraine rolled her eyes. Actually rolled her eyes. "Oh, here we go," she said mockingly. "The big dramatic speech, very theatrical. I suppose that's what you do best, isn't it? Make everything about your feelings and your career and your legacy, but what about being realistic? What about accepting that your time is up?" "My time is up," Ian repeated, his voice rising now. "My time is up. Who are you to decide that? Who are you to sit in that chair and tell me or anyone when their time is up?" "I'm the host of this show," Lorraine said sharply, "and I have every right to ask the questions that need to be asked. If you can't handle a little bit of honesty, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews anymore." "Honesty," Ian said, his voice now filled with disbelief. "You call this honesty? This isn't honesty. This is cruelty. This is you using your platform to tear someone down for absolutely no reason." "I'm not tearing you down," Lorraine insisted, but her voice was defensive. "Now, I'm just saying what everyone is thinking, that you're clinging to relevance, that you're desperate to stay in the spotlight, that you can't accept that younger, more talented actors are coming up and you're being left behind. More talented," she had said, "more talented." The audience was completely silent now. Some people looked angry, others looked shocked, but everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Ian stood up slowly, deliberately. He removed his microphone and placed it on the chair beside him. His movements were calm, but his face showed the depth of his anger and hurt. "I came here today," he said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion, "expecting to have a pleasant conversation about my work. Instead, I have been insulted, dismissed, and disrespected in ways I never imagined possible. You have questioned my talent, my relevance, my right to continue working in the field I have dedicated my life to, and you have done all of this on live television in front of an audience without any provocation whatsoever." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Lorraine said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. She seemed to be realizing, perhaps for the first time, that this was not going according to plan. "Dramatic," Ian said, his voice rising to a level rarely heard from the usually composed actor. "You attack me on your show. You call my work tired and sad. You tell me I'm taking opportunities from others and that I'm past my prime, and you expect me to just sit here and take it? What kind of person are you?" Lorraine's face flushed red. "I'm doing my job. I'm asking tough questions." "Tough questions?" Ian laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "There's a difference between tough questions and cruelty. There's a difference between journalism and bullying. And what you have done here today is nothing short of bullying. Now wait just a minute, Lorraine said, standing up from her chair. You don't get to come on my show and accuse me of bullying. I have been nothing but professional. Professional. Ian's voice was incredulous. You have spent this entire interview trying to make me feel small, trying to make me feel like I don't deserve to be here, trying to convince me and everyone watching that my career should be over. That is not professional. That is vindictive. The producers were now visible at the edge of the stage, trying to figure out how to intervene. But this had gone too far. There was no way to salvage this. If you can't handle a difficult interview, then maybe you were too old for this, Lorraine snapped, and as soon as the words left her mouth, she seemed to regret them. The audience audibly gasped. Some people even booed. Ian stared at her for a long moment. The hurt in his eyes was evident. This was a man who had faced discrimination, who had fought for acceptance his entire life, who had overcome countless obstacles to become one of the most celebrated actors in the world. And now on a morning talk show, he was being told he was too old, too irrelevant, too much. I'm done, Ian said quietly. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with your disrespect. And I'm done trying to remain civil in the face of such hostility. He turned to walk off the stage. Where do you think you're going? Lorraine called after him, her voice now tinged with panic. We're not finished here. Ian stopped and turned back to face her. Yes, we are. We are absolutely finished. I will not sit here and allow you to treat me this way. I have more respect for myself than that. You can't just walk off my show, Lorraine said, her voice rising in pitch. That's unprofessional. Unprofessional? Ian repeated, his voice filled with disbelief. You have spent the last 15 minutes insulting me, and you want to talk about professionalism? You have some nerve. Lorraine's face was now bright red. She looked at the producers, at the crew, at the audience, trying to find support, but nobody was on her side. The looks on people's faces made that clear. Fine, she said, her voice brittle. If you want to throw a tantrum and storm off like a child, then go ahead. Just proves my point that you can't handle criticism. Ian stopped walking. He turned back one more time, and when he spoke, his voice was calm again, but filled with a quiet fury. Criticism, he said slowly, is when someone offers constructive feedback to help you improve. What you did today was not criticism, it was an attack. You questioned my talent, my relevance, my right to work. You called my performances tired and sad. You suggested I was being selfish by continuing to act. You told me I was past my prime and that more talented actors were leaving me behind. And then when I stood up for myself, you called me old and told me I couldn't handle it. That is not criticism. That is cruelty. And I will not stand here and pretend otherwise. He looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching who has ever been told they're too old, too irrelevant, or that their time is up, please know that your worth is not determined by someone else's opinion. Your value is not diminished because someone decides you've been around too long. Keep doing what you love. Keep pursuing your passion, and never let anyone make you feel small. Then he walked off the stage. Lorraine stood there speechless for a moment. The audience sat in stunned silence. The producers rushed onto the set, trying to figure out what to do next. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the chaos. Well, Lorraine finally said, trying to regain some composure, but her voice was shaking. That was certainly unexpected. I think we need to take a quick break. But the damage was done. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance had turned into a nightmare, and it was all captured on live television for the world to see. As Ian McKellen walked through the backstage area, crew members stepped aside, their faces showing a mix of sympathy and admiration. Some wanted to apologize to express their support, but Ian simply nodded politely and kept walking. He had said what needed to be said. He had stood up for himself in a moment when he could have easily backed down or tried to smooth things over. Back in the studio, Lorraine sat in her chair, the color slowly returning to her normal complexion. She looked rattled, her confidence completely shattered. The producers were in her ear, but she seemed barely able to focus on what they were saying. The audience began to murmur among themselves. Some were pulling out their phones, already typing messages about what they had just witnessed. This was going to be everywhere within minutes. Social media was about to explode. We're back, Lorraine said when the show returned from the break, but her voice lacked its usual energy. That was well, I'm sure you all saw what happened. McKellen decided to leave the interview. I was simply asking questions that I felt were relevant, and unfortunately, he didn't appreciate that approach. But even as she tried to justify her actions, it was clear that she knew she had made a mistake. Her attempts to paint herself as the victim, as the journalist just doing her job, fell flat. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone had heard what she said. The rest of the show continued, but the energy was completely off. Lorraine stumbled through her remaining segments, her usual charm and charisma nowhere to be found. The crew worked mechanically, going through the motions, but the atmosphere was heavy with the weight of what had transpired. In the green room, Ian collected his belongings. His hands were still slightly shaking from the adrenaline, from the emotion of the confrontation. He was not someone who enjoyed conflict. He was not someone who sought out drama, but he also was not someone who would allow himself to be disrespected without standing up for himself. A young production assistant approached him tentatively. "Mr. McKellen," she said quietly, "I just wanted to say, I thought you handled that with incredible grace. What she said to you was completely out of line." Ian smiled at her, a genuine smile despite the circumstances. "Thank you, dear. That's very kind of you to say. A lot of us back here were really upset by how she treated you," the assistant continued. "We couldn't believe what we were hearing. You're a legend, and you didn't deserve any of that." "Well," Ian said gently, "I appreciate your support, but I hope people remember that this isn't about me being a legend or having a certain status. This is about basic human respect. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their age or their position, or anything else." The assistant nodded, clearly moved by his words. "Still, I'm glad you stood up for yourself. A lot of people would have just sat there and taken it." "Perhaps," Ian said, "but I've learned over the years that sometimes you have to draw a line. Sometimes you have to say, enough is enough." And today was one of those times. Back on set, Lorraine was wrapping up the show. Her closing remarks were brief and lacked her usual warmth. She looked exhausted, deflated, as if the reality of what she had done was finally sinking in. "That's all we have time for today," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow." As soon as the camera stopped rolling, she slumped in her chair. The producers approached her, and from the looks on their faces, the conversation was not going to be pleasant. But the story wasn't about what happened after. It wasn't about the fallout or the consequences or the public reaction. The story was about those moments on stage when a respected actor was pushed too far, when a host revealed a cruel streak that nobody had expected, when dignity and self-respect won out over politeness and people-pleasing. It was about the power of standing up for yourself even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means walking away from a situation that has become toxic, even when it means refusing to play along with someone else's attempt to diminish you. Ian McKellen had walked onto that stage expecting a normal interview. He had walked off having delivered one of the most powerful statements about self-worth and respect that television had seen in years. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't wanted it. But when the moment came, he didn't back down. And that was what made it so compelling. That was what made people pay attention. Because in a world where so many people suffer disrespect and silence, where so many people swallow their hurt and anger to keep the peace, watching someone calmly and firmly refuse to accept mistreatment was powerful. It was a reminder that you don't have to accept cruelty just because someone has a platform or a position of authority. The interview became a lesson, though not the one Lorraine had intended. It became a masterclass in maintaining your dignity while refusing to be a doormat. It showed that you can be polite and professional while still setting firm boundaries, that you can respect yourself without being aggressive or petty. As Ian left the building that day, stepping out into the bright morning sunlight, he took a deep breath. The confrontation had been exhausting, emotionally draining in a way that even the most demanding theatrical performance rarely was. But he also felt a sense of peace. He had not compromised his values. He had not allowed himself to be diminished. He had spoken his truth, and he had done it with the same thoughtfulness and integrity that had defined his entire career. The world would talk about this moment for a long time to come. People would debate it, analyze it, share their opinions. But for Ian McKellen, it was simple. He had been disrespected, and he had responded with dignity. He had been attacked, and he had defended himself without losing his humanity. He had been pushed to a breaking point, and instead of breaking, he had walked away with his head held high. That morning, on a television show that was supposed to be light and cheerful, something real had happened, something raw and honest and uncomfortable. A host had revealed a side of herself that was ugly and cruel, and a guest had shown what it looks like to refuse that cruelty with grace and strength. It was a reminder that age does not diminish worth, that experience is valuable, not something to be ashamed of, that everyone, regardless of how long they've been in their field, deserves respect and dignity, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. The cameras had captured it all, every word, every expression, every moment of tension. And in those captured moments, millions of people would see a reflection of their own experiences. The times they had been told they were too old, too inexperienced, too different, too much, or not enough. The times they had been made to feel small by someone who should have treated them better. The times they had wanted to stand up for themselves but weren't sure if they could. And they would see that it was possible, that you could stand up for yourself, that you could walk away from disrespect, that you could maintain your dignity even in the face of someone determined to take it from you. This was the power of that morning, not in the scandal or the drama or the shock value, but in the simple, profound act of one person saying no. No to disrespect, no to cruelty, no to being diminished, just no. And in that refusal, in that moment of standing firm, Ian McKellen had given everyone watching permission to do the same in their own lives, to recognize their worth, to defend their dignity, to know that they never have to accept being treated as less than they are. The interview had lasted less than 20 minutes, but its impact would last much longer, because sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to accept the unacceptable, to remind everyone else that they have that right too, that they have that power, that they don't have to sit there and take it, no matter who is dishing it out. Ian McKellen had come to the show as a guest. He had left as something more, a symbol of self-respect, of dignity, of the courage it takes to walk away from a situation that has become untenable. And while he would probably have preferred a pleasant, uneventful interview, what happened instead became something far more meaningful. It became proof that you should never underestimate the importance of treating people with respect. That positions of power come with responsibilities, not just privileges. That a platform should be used to lift people up, not tear them down. And that when those principles are violated, there will be people who refuse to play along. The studio was empty now, the lights dimmed, the cameras off. But what had happened there that morning would echo far beyond those walls. In living rooms and offices and coffee shops, people would discuss it. Some would defend Lorraine, though they would be few. Most would stand with Ian, recognizing in his response their own suppressed desire to stand up for themselves. And maybe, just maybe, some of them would find the courage to do it, to walk away from the job that doesn't respect them, to end the relationship that diminishes them, to refuse the treatment that demeans them because they had seen someone do it with grace and strength and they knew it was possible. That was the real story. Not just what happened, but what it represented. Not just the words that were said, but what they revealed about respect and dignity and self-worth. Not just one actor walking off one show, but a moment that captured something universal about the human need to be treated with basic decency. And in the end, that was why it mattered. why people would remember it, why it would be talked about and analyzed and referenced for years to come. Because it was real, because it was raw, because it was a perfect encapsulation of what happens when someone finally says enough. When someone decides that their dignity is worth more than keeping the peace. When someone chooses themselves over the comfort of others, Ian McKellen had made that choice. And in doing so, he had given a gift to everyone watching. The gift of seeing what self-respect looks like in action, the gift of witnessing someone refuse to be diminished, the gift of knowing that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. That was the moment. That was the story. That was what happened when a legendary actor met a host who forgot that respect is not optional, and that everyone, regardless of their age or status or anything else, deserves to be treated like a human being. And when that basic principle was violated, when that line was crossed, there was only one response that made sense. Walking away, head held high, dignity intact, worth undiminished. And that was exactly what Ian McKellen